Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Bloody Jacob here to bring you my top 10 favorite characters on the Walking Dead TV series, Dead or Alive. This one being very different from a bit different from my previous video on the show. I think it was my top 5 favorite characters left alive, but this one's talking about any characters dead or alive at this point, so we can talk about, we can still talk about characters like Daryl and Rick and stuff like that, and Glenn, but we can also bring discussions about characters that are long dead, like Shane and Merle and Hershel and the governor and stuff like that, and Andrea, of course. So this does change my list quite a bit, and we're going to count down from 10, and if you guys don't feel like watching me ramble, you can always just look at my list below and you'll see the whole thing. So but for now we're going to start at number 10, and my number 10 favorite character of all time on The Walking Dead at this point in the show would have to be Glenn, and of course played by Stephen Yeun, I don't know. I can't pronounce his last name, I'm sorry. I'd have to watch an interview with him or something to hear someone pronounce it correctly. But you guys know who I'm talking about, Glenn Rhee. Just a very good character. He is one of our original characters as well. I mean, we heard his voice at the end of the first episode of the entire series, if you guys remember that. Days Gone By. Hey, dumbass in the tank. And then, we've seen him right away in the second episode. And so he's been around for a very long time. He's one of our oldest characters left, we still have from that time. Along with, characters like Rick and Carol and Morgan and stuff like that. And Daryl as well, but Glenn to even further degree. And Glenn's just had a very good transformation as a character, very well developed, because, he was just the pizza delivery boy before the apocalypse started. But we find out that he's actually a pretty good architect, or not really an architect, but he just sort of knows how to maneuver and get out of situations very quickly, physically. And he sort of leads them, when they're in their city, they're in the city and stuff like that. He knows how to avoid walkers and stuff like that. So he has that talent almost immediately. But once they get to the farm, he sort of evolves into something else entirely. When he meets Maggie, it changes things for him. He's very awkward and shy, and he tries to make these jokes and things like that. Very different to how it is now. And of course, Laurie had actually asked him to get the pregnancy test and things like that. Which Dale picked up on. And just the way Glenn handled the whole situation was very awkward and hilarious, and that was great. And of course, Maggie having sex with him in the pharmacy. This isn't really about Maggie. Maggie's not really one of my favorites, but still, just Glenn's reaction to that, just being so bewildered by a girl wanting to do that with him at all, even if her options are very short nowadays. But despite the relationships are starting pretty questionably, it's really turned into something very serious and very, very what's the word for very serious and believable and very fundamental to a big part of the show right now, because they've been together since then, and even through Glenn discovering the walkers in the barn and things like that. And Glenn did have a great relationship with Hershel as well. Hershel sort of becoming a father figure to Glenn in a certain way. And I always remember one of Hershel's quotes from season 2 when he gave the pocket watch over to Glenn. He says, "When you're a father someday, you'll understand. No man is good enough for your little girl until one is." And he gives Glenn the pocket watch, which I think Glenn still keeps with him. I'm not sure if they still have it or not, but I think he kept it with him for a very long time. At least he may still have it, in fact. And so Hershel definitely developed a very good respect for Glenn as well, after kind of questioning the race of him and stuff like that at first. But Hershel came around very quickly, and he was very considerate and things like that to their relationship. And he was very proud that his girl was actually able to his little girl was actually able to get married in the apocalypse, and someone found her to give her that love and feel and stuff like that. So I think Hershel is very proud that that happened for her. And very good for Glenn as well. And there's just a lot I could say about Glenn. And Glenn has come like a very long way from being the simple pizza delivery boy. He's just become a very hardened survivor himself. And he's actually pretty decent in a fight as well, which we wouldn't really expect from him back in season 1 or season 2. And he knows how to handle himself, he knows how to take care of himself physically. And yeah, he's definitely one of our most capable survivors, I think. And as we've seen especially at the end of season 5 with Conquer, him sparing Nicholas, shows he still tries to hang on to that conscience, that sliver of hope that I think he sort of got from Hershel. And so yeah, you can admire that about the character, even if it's not like the best idea for how the world is in the show nowadays. You still have to admire that about Glenn, and I definitely think it fits for his character. So yeah, my number 10 favorite character of all time, dead or alive on The Walking Dead, would have to be Glenn. Very good character. And he's definitely one of my, ones I don't want to die on the show at all. But yeah, we'll see where that goes. And my number 9 favorite character of all time on the show would have to be Andrea, played by Laurie Holden. I know there was like a lot of hate on this character while she was on, because she did do some questionable things with the way they wrote her. Like her sleeping with the governor, forming a brief relationship with him. But you kind of have to understand from her perspective how she'd want that chance at like a normal place, a normal life, with Woodbury and stuff like that. And you kind of sort of like, again, admire that she didn't want anyone to die. She wanted to make things alright for both sides, as bad as that turned out. But I actually really liked her character, especially during season 1 and season 2. In particular during season 2, but also in season 1, because we got to see her deal with Amy's death and things like that. And just fantastic acting from Laurie Holden all around, all throughout the character's run on the show. Just the emotion she evokes. The people like kind of make fun of her cry face when she's looking at Amy dying and stuff like that. But I just thought it was some of the most emotional acting we ever had on the show, and I think Laurie Holden did a great job portraying that. And when everyone like really breaks down, like sobs, they have a cry face. So none of us are pretty when we're doing that. But except Laurie Holden, I think she's gorgeous. But nonetheless, a very good character, and I actually liked. She was suicidal for a time as well, until that Dale sort of like talked her out of it. And then she got pissed at Dale, for taking her choice away, even though it was actually her choice in the end, one way or the other. And I did like sort of like the little father-daughter relationship her and Dale had. And Dale's a character I probably would have had on the list had I like had 1 or 2 more spots. He's definitely he's definitely one of the runner-ups for this. And I liked the relationship Andrea had with him. And very much Dale cared about her and Amy. And I'm glad they didn't go the direction of the comics where they actually had like a romantic sexual relationship. I don't think that would have made sense for the characters on the show. But I did like what they did with them as far as the TV series versions nonetheless. And Andrea, I just very much liked her in season 2 because we see her like sort of talk to Beth, and despite her sort of pushing Beth for that suicide attempt, I believe Andrea was right. It's her choice. They have to find their own reasons to keep going or to die. They have to sort of find their own way, sort of like she did, and why she tried to keep herself around after her whole more suicidal side. And I think Andrea is very much right about that, and she is a very big contrast to Laurie in that situation as well, but I definitely agree with Andrea more so. Even when it was a little bit dark, it was still right, I think, to a certain extent. And and I also admired how that she became like more of a capable survivor as well. With Shane gun training her and things like that. And of course, she slept with her and Shane did it in the, in the car on the ride back when they were looking for Sophia. And I just think they were sort of like hyped off of all that lust and the rush they were getting from killing those walkers. But yeah, overall, Andrea, I think a great female character, a great actress portraying her with Laurie Holden. And she's definitely one I wish was still alive for sure. I think she died way, way too soon. And I think I would have loved if she did become what she is in the comic books, sort of eventually forming that relationship with Rick and becoming even more fundamental and crucial to the group's survival. I would have loved for them to take it that way instead of just killing her off. When they killed her off, it kind of pissed me off. Even though her death was actually very well handled, sort of like allowing Rick to free himself of the Laurie hallucinations and, bringing those people back from Woodbury to the prison. Even though it didn't last very long once it got into season 4, but still it did a lot for Rick, and it left an impression on the group in general with Andrea's death, and Michonne's reaction to it. It drove Michonne's whole quest to finding the governor, to avenge Andrea. And I did like their friendship as well, despite Andrea sort of ruining it. But her death was well handled, but I wish it never happened. And if I had a choice, I'd have her still alive nowadays. And if Andrea was still alive nowadays, she would probably be my favorite character, my favorite female character on the show. I probably would put her ahead of Michonne, but since Michonne has been around for so much longer since Andrea's death, Michonne has risen above her. But Andrea, nonetheless, a great character, still one of my favorites on the show of all time. So yeah, number 9, Andrea. And number 8, I think I have to go with Scott Wilson's Hershel Greene. Just a fantastic character and one of the, couple of moral compasses we've had throughout the show. We had Dale and then we had Hershel sort of like take that place after Dale's death. And I put Hershel above Dale and, the other 3 I've mentioned so far. And Scott Wilson just did such a fine job acting as a character, sort of hanging on to that Christian belief, but then just seeing it completely torn out of him because of seeing what this world had become and what the survivors have to do. And he still tries to draw inspiration and strength from it in the later seasons he has, despite it. And so you really have to admire that about Hershel. And of course, we have to feel for his daughters, his relationship with his daughters, Beth and Maggie, of course. Luckily, he never had to see Beth die, so that's good. And he actually got to die, sort of satisfied because of Rick's whole not too far gone speech in the season 4 mid-season finale. Hershel actually got to smile before the governor took his head off, which was very, very brutal and one of the more shocking deaths on the series so far, that's for sure. But he really brought Rick full circle, and I like how he sort of guided Rick while he was going through that complete snap when Laurie died and when he was hallucinating, and how Rick came to him for guidance and advice about giving over Michonne to the governor and different things like that. And I liked his father-son relationship with Glenn, and Hershel was also a sharpshooter. Not a lot of people talk about this anymore, but if you guys remember, back in season 2 episode Nebraska, when Dave and Tony's group attacked him when they were in that bar, Hershel was actually a very good shot with a gun Rick had given him. And then he also had that unlimited ammo showing when in the season 2 finale beside the dying fire, when he was using that shotgun just to, shooting walkers in the head left and right, just taking walkers down all over the place. And I sort of wish they would have showed Hershel's marksman skills a little bit more, because I thought that was a very cool part to the character. But even when the governor sent that truck of walkers, through the fences into the prison area, we've seen that he's still able to shoot a few of them down while he was on the ground without his crutches. And a very sad end for the character as well. Of course, the governor decapitating him in front of the group as a way to try and take the prison. Very shocking. It was very hard seeing the reactions from Maggie and Beth, and even when Glenn found out later on. And of course, Rick's reaction. Rick cared a lot about him as well, and he was just a very important piece to the group. He was on the council, different things like that. But Hershel, just a great moral compass to the group. Very well acted by Scott Wilson. And there's just a lot I could talk about him. I'd even like the interment episode in season 4, a few episodes before the Too Far Gone mid-season. When he was locked in the cell block and he was trying to help everyone, and he defended the kids from the walkers and stuff by himself, which is a very much a Hershel episode. I thought that was all fantastic. And so yeah, I could go on and on for a while, but I don't want to, overdo it with the time this video goes. So I'm going to move on now. My number 8 favorite character of all time on The Walking Dead, dead or alive, would have to be Hershel Greene, played by Scott Wilson. Great character, and definitely a character I still miss to this day. And my number 7, my 7th favorite character of all time ever on the show would have to be Michonne, played by Danai Gurira. She's my favorite female character on the show at this point in general. I said before, if Andrea was still alive, I'd probably put Andrea over her. But Andrea isn't. Andrea's been gone for a while, since the end of Season 3. And because of that, Michonne's actually had a lot more time to develop as a character now. And she's just become something very extraordinary. I love Danai Gurira's performance as a character in general. Danai Gurira is such a bright and talkative and open person. And, Michonne, at least at first, and still sort of at this point, she's still very much stoic and has a lot of damage that she's holding back. And, Season 3, she's kind of like a mystery, her seeing, the Glenn and Maggie get taken by Merle, back to the governor. And, seeing her bring the formula back to the prison, Rick and the rest of the group not really trusting her at first. But over the course of the season, she's gained so much trust from every group member. And she's really become one of the key characters that are left alive at this point. And one of my favorite things about her is just her relationship with Rick and Carl. I ship Michonne, okay, which is, the couple idea of Rick and Michonne getting together, which I still think could happen because it just really makes so much sense. Because I really feel like Michonne's not only a friend to Carl, but I think me and other people sort of pick up a second mother dynamic she has for Carl too. With her losing her own child and her boyfriend and her boyfriend's friend and stuff like that. The way she would she cradled Judith and she cried, reminding her of her own child. And I just really like the relationship she has with both Rick and Carl. And Michonne's not disloyal. She did that for Rick. She knocked Rick out at the end of Try to sort of get him out of that situation. And I believe her when she said she would still back him up if it came down to it. She just doesn't want the situation to be forced in Alexandria if it doesn't have to be. But if it happens, she'll always be there for Rick and the rest of the group. And I believe her. And so I still kind of hope that Rick and Michonne are the long-term plan for the show. But I don't really want to see either of them get with anyone else, but I know it's probably going to happen. But I still hope it's a long-term plan. And I just think it would make so much sense, and yeah. But despite that, even if they don't do the Rick and Michonne relationship at some point, which I really hope they do, like I just said a million times, I still think she's going to be a survivor that's around for a very, very long time. I wouldn't even mind her being one that survives until the end of the whole series. Maybe she survives the whole thing. I'd love that. Maybe she could still be around after, I think Rick inevitably I think she could still be around after Rick and sort of inevitably dies by the end of the series, which is going to be very tragic, but we all kind of know what's going to happen by the end. So I won't mind her still being around to sort of guide Carl. I think that's very much a possibility. We'll see her and Morgan's interaction. That should be interesting because with Morgan valuing life now and Michonne wanting to keep peace and keep the situation they could have at Alexandria, they could have a very interesting contrast or parallel with each other actually. So my number 7 would have to be Michonne. And I could put her a little bit higher actually. I could probably move her up to number 6 or number 5. But it's just what I wrote down at the time. I could rotate characters all day if I really wanted to. But Michonne, my favorite female character on the show ever, and she continues to be. And I could probably put her ahead of Merle and the governor coming up, but I just kind of have to give the characters credit who have really left a mark on me. And Michonne will probably move up as it goes on. As the show goes on, she'll probably move up a few spots, most likely. But for now, my number 7 favorite character on the show, dead or alive, would have to be Michonne. Great female character, my favorite female character ever on the show. Danai Gurira does a great job on the role. And I can't wait to see where she goes for the rest of the series. So Number 7 is Michonne. My number 6 would have to be Merle Dixon, played by Michael Rooker. And Michael Rooker is just a fantastic guy, really. He's just like a really entertaining guy. Whenever you see him at like conventions or interviews, he's just really like eager to interact with his fans and stuff like that. He's like really passionate about his work, and he's just a great guy to talk to. I haven't talked to him personally, but I've seen like plenty of interviews with him, and just the way he interacts with the public. It's just a really fantastic and welcoming way to approach it all. And Michael Rooker is a fantastic actor in general. But this role is probably my favorite of his that I've seen him in. I think it's probably a lot of people's. Yeah, I still have to see Guardians of the Galaxy, of course, but Merle Dixon, such a great character. When we see him in season 1, we see him pretty early on. We see like he's a very much like a racist, redneck type of character. But yet he becomes so much more. Of course he's Daryl's brother, and they have like such a history with each other. And, because of that, there's like so much damage between them. They're both abused by their father. And we see in episode 10 of season 3, Home, where Merle sort of like sees all scars on Daryl's back and, sees how much their father abused him when Merle left. And, Merle just really like cracked, knowing all that and stuff like that. And Merle, he had a very interesting angle in season 3. Yes, he works with the governor, but yet he's still very eager to find his brother because he believes he's still alive, which he is, of course. And just the whole angle that went down when Merle rejoined the group. There's a lot of tension with him and Glenn. Of course, with Merle actually like beating Glenn in the room and letting Walker in and stuff like that. But Merle just almost all the way redeemed himself by the end of it all. When he was going to take the Michonne to the governor, because he's the bad guy, the one who's going to do the dirty work. But, he actually changed his mind and actually ended up letting Michonne go. And Michonne and him had some very interesting conversations in, the sorrowful life. One of my favorite quotes of probably one of my favorite quotes of the entire series would have to be when Michonne and him are talking about all the men Merle has killed. I believe he said he killed around 16 men since this thing started, and Michonne kind of points out how he never killed anyone until he met the governor, and the governor sort of took him down this darker path of losing his humanity and stuff like that, made him even more cold than he already was. And of course Merle had probably killed people with the military during wars and stuff like that. But, just flat out killing people and taking their stuff for what? Is completely different. And Michonne sort of points out the weight of, the things Merle has done that he's describing and how it actually has taken a toll on him. And my favorite quote would be, Michonne saying, "You talk about the weight of what you do or the weight of what you've done. A bad man, someone truly evil, they're light as a feather." And so it basically illustrates that Merle was never an evil person. He was just sort of brought into the situation, sort of forced into these circumstances. And, he actually feels remorse for the things he's done. And Michonne is actually let go by Merle, and Merle sort of goes on this personal quest. He drinks, we see the walkers surrounding the car and stuff like that, but he ends up luring the walkers to the meeting spot where the governor's going to meet him to, exchange Michonne and stuff like that. And Merle just, blasts the radio, the stereo on the car, and just draws all these walkers in. And while the governor and the rest of the governor's men are distracted, Merle actually shows off his marksman skills by he actually kills quite a few of the governor's men. He shoots a few of them down. And Merle actually almost killed the governor himself. But of course, a character got in the way of that, Ellen's son, I believe. And of course, Merle was spotted after that. And, Martinez and, the Shumpert and the rest of the governor's men, they brought out Merle after Merle was distracted by a walker trying to attack him. They stomp Merle into the ground, and then Merle is thrown in with the governor, and him and the governor briefly fight but with a very brutal death of the governor biting off Merle's fingers and then kind of snapping his arm back, with the blade and stuff like that after he had amputated it and things like that. Some time ago he used that blade on his hand and stuff, which was really cool. And shows how tough Morrissey was to do that all on his own in the first place. But the hacksaw and stuff, you guys remember when he was chained down the roof with the handcuffs in season 1. But just a very brutal way Merle went out, very sad. And he did sort of redeem himself by actually trying to kill the governor, and he almost did as well. And I sort of believe that Merle should have probably been able to put up a better fight against the governor, especially with all his military training and what he was shown to be able to do just before that. But then you could argue that Merle had been drinking, and maybe he was a bit put down by of course the governor's men stopping him into the ground before being thrown in for the fight. So you could argue that Merle was at at least a couple of disadvantages right there. But still, I think Merle should have put up a better fight against the governor, even though as brutal and strong as the governor is. It should have been a better fight, I think. But nonetheless, it was very heart-wrenching to see Daryl finding his brother as a walker after the governor had just shot him in the chest. And it's a very sad scene to see the brothers' relationship end like that. After it just looked like there could be a chance it could be different between them and the rest of the group. I sort of wish Merle could have redeemed himself a little bit more directly with Glenn. But I think even Glenn could sort of see the good Merle did in the end, perhaps, maybe to a certain extent anyway. But Merle, a very good character, a very complex and multi-layered character. He even sort of put down Rick about even thinking about bringing Michonne over to the governor. And he said, you give him that girl, he ain't just gonna kill her, he's gonna do things to her. You let that happen? For a shot. You're cold as ice, Officer Friendly. Officer Friendly, of course, being what Rick called himself to Merle when he knocked him down and handcuffed him to the roof in season 1. But just a very good character, played brilliantly by Michael Rooker. Still one of my favorite characters on the show of all time. So I could go on about him for a while. Just very multi-layered and very complex. He became an anti-hero by the end of it. A very good character. I definitely miss him on the show. He's eccentric, but you can't question his loyalty to his brother. Number 6 favorite character of all time on The Walking Dead, dead or alive, would be Merle Dixon, Michael Rooker. My number 5 favorite character of all time. We're going to try and get through this a little bit quicker here, but no promises. My number 5 favorite character of all time on The Walking Dead, dead or alive, would have to be the governor, or Philip Blake, played by David Morrissey. And the governor is a fantastic villain. Probably my favorite villain I've ever seen on TV, even up to this point. David Morrissey has played him so well, with the governor trying to build up that facade of, Woodbury being what it is. And, with walkers and the fish tanks and stuff like that, he snapped. And, just seeing him keeping his zombified daughter Penny alive, you can see the psychological trauma he's been through. And the governor is just a great villain because, we've seen him with the whole Woodbury manipulation, what he did to Andrea, and how he actually killed all of his own men out of frustration at the season 3 finale. And we actually see him go down a very interesting road in season 4. When he shows up, he has those 2 solo episodes, Live Bait and Dead Weight, I think it was. Let me check that real quick. I think it was Dead Weight. Live Bait and Dead Weight were the 2 Governor solo episodes. We see him sort of on his own after the season 3 finale. Shumpert and Martinez had left him, after he didn't really seem to care if he lived or died anymore. He sort of let that walker walk up to him over the campfire until Martinez killed it. And at first, when I was seeing those episodes, I sort of thought he was starting to feel a little bit of remorse or guilt for the things he's done, to Andrea and different characters like that. And that may have been a small part of it, but, just everything he's done. And just seeing how he met up with, Tara, Lily, and Mandy. what was the little girl's name? Maggie, not Maggie. Whoa, shit. But yeah, don't mind that. I would edit that out if I could. But anyway, I forget the little blonde girl's name. Let me see if I can find this for a second. Yeah, Megan. Okay, that's it. Megan being Lily's daughter, and he sort of like forms a brief relationship with Lily as well. And he's seen. I would have liked the governor to sort of like bring Tara, Lily, and Megan back to the prison, sort of letting them take care of them. As he acknowledges that they can never live in peace at the prison together, and. The governor, of course, losing his eye and stuff like that in the mid-season finale. And, let's see. There's just a lot I could say about this character. It's hard to condense it down to keep on going with the rankings. But I saw he had a very good character study in those 2 episodes. Sort of like when he met up with Martinez again. And, his group that Martinez had formed, actually. He just had this like compulsive need in him to sort of like take control, and this control freak type of psyche. And when he killed Martinez and fed him to the walkers, then took over that group and tried to bring him back to the prison to take it over. And we've seen how it ended up for him. That fist fight with Rick was very brutal and very intense as well. And I did love seeing the governor killing those walkers in that pit when he saved Megan. That is very good as well. See, that's great with The Walking Dead. Even like the villains, we see like layers of, and it's just good to see that the governor could still care to a certain degree, even though that's probably just because he was reminded of his daughter and his wife and the things that he lost, and he actually hesitated killing Hershel at first. He called Hershel a better man than Rick, and when he was holding the katana to Hershel's neck. When Rick was making that not too far gone speech, we can all come back from this. You notice the governor was actually lowering the katana sword at first. But then, of course, he had that part of himself snap again, and he just, decapitated Hershel, as the guys know. And, of course, with Michonne impaling him on her sword in the end, and Lily putting him down. A very fitting death for the character, with Michonne being able to avenge Andrea and things like that. But, yeah, nonetheless, the governor was a great villain on the show. It'll be very hard for him to be topped at all within the rest of the series. We might have a chance of that, once Negan eventually comes into it. But that'll be very difficult to do, because David Morrissey just did such a great job playing the governor. And he's one of my favorite characters on the show of all time. And so, yeah, my number 5 favorite character on The Walking Dead ever of all time, dead or alive, would be the governor, played by David Morrissey. Great villain. It's going to be really hard to top him. And, I'm going to try to get through this a little bit faster. My number 4 would be Morgan Jones, played by Lennie James. I did talk about him in my last Walking Dead video of my favorite characters still alive. Lennie James just brings, like, a whole nother quality to the show. Because whenever he's on the show, he sort of, like, steals the episode with his acting abilities as the character. It's just really, really something special. And just hit the level of acting and the level of depth he brings to the character of Morgan. He's the first human Rick interacts with when he wakes up from the coma. And he sort of like shows Rick the ropes of the world they're in now. And he has his son Duane. And it was very hard to see, like when they first separated from each other at the end of Days Gone By. Or, in Days Gone By. I remember everyone waiting for, a couple more years, they're saying, where's Morgan? When's Morgan going to show up again? All that wonder and stuff like that. That was very suspenseful, or frustrating, depending on how you look at it. But, of course, we've seen him again in Season 3 with Clear. And Clear, we just seen a complete 180 for the character. We find out that he actually had lost his son. He was trying to put his wife down at the end of Days Gone By, but he was never able to actually do it, and he just hesitated too much, so it eventually came to this very extreme point where, his wife actually started killing his son, devouring him as a walker. And that's when Morgan finally killed his wife, put down his wife, and then he had to probably put down his son as well. And, like he says, he's seen red, and he did it, but it was too late. And you can see this complete trauma Merle, the complete trauma Morgan had gone through. And it's a very good parallel to how Rick lost his wife. And, he still has his son, but they've been through, like, similar pain in the apocalypse. But Morgan, perhaps even more so. Which is why it's such an interesting development when we see him again in Season 5, sort of like following Rick and the rest of the group's trail. He has this whole different philosophy on life. Instead of wanting to clear all these walkers and, trying to survive however he can by setting those brilliant booby traps in Season 3, by the way. He basically, like he tells Daryl, all life is precious. And, he tries to conserve it as much as he can. And someone brought up an interesting thing about when he was able to take out those two members of the Wolves by himself, with that staff, which was really badass, by the way. Morgan busting out those Jedi skills. And, yeah, because he actually, when he put the Wolves members in the car, I started distracted by the shower turning on, but when he put those Wolves in the car and he honked the horn, I initially thought that he was doing that to lure the walkers there so they could sort of like devour the Wolves and finish them off. But Morgan had actually done that to check to see if there are any walkers in the area, which is why he probably looked around for a little bit. So maybe he was trying to keep them alive or make sure they would be alive when they woke up. But that may have been a mistake, because I'm sure the Wolves will come back to bite our group in the ass in Season 6. But still, very much interesting contrast when he saves Daryl and Aaron later in the episode. He tells Daryl all life is precious. When Daryl asks him why, then he gives Daryl the map. With that note Abraham had wrote to Rick. Sorry I was an asshole. The new world's gonna need Rick Grimes. And with Daryl leading them back, to Alexandria. And of course Morgan unfortunately meeting Rick again, but in the process of seeing him executing Pete. And now I'm sure, even with Morgan believing all life is precious, it probably wasn't the best thing for him to see upon meeting Rick again. But I think Morgan would probably understand if Rick had explained to him the circumstances of it all and the reasoning behind it. Morgan would probably understand it a little bit more. And, I really hope Morgan becomes a regular on the show for Season 6 and onward. I think there's a lot they could do with the character, and he definitely brings another level of quality to it when he's on. And this situation just calls for him being a regular now. And I think Lennie James can do it. I think he sees the value of being on the show. And I hope he's not killed off very soon whatsoever. I hope he's a mainstay for a very long time, if he ever dies. I would like him to never die, but we know that's kind of unlikely for this show. But I would nonetheless like him to be around for a very long time. At least for a few seasons, maybe a couple at least. But, it's a very good character, very great acting that's brought into it by Lennie James. And I can't wait to see what they do with the character in Season 6, seeing him and Rick's interactions and how he interacts with the other characters in the group as well. But yeah, my number 4 favorite character of all time on The Walking Dead, dead or alive, would be Morgan Jones, Lennie James. Only 3 more left. We're almost done. I apologize, guys. I know this video is overly long. I know people have done videos that are shorter than this, but I just really like to ramble about things I enjoy. So, my number 3 favorite character of all time in general, dead or alive on The Walking Dead, would have to be Shane Walsh, John Bernthal. Wow, just a lot I could say about his character. While he was around, I will say that he was my favorite character on the show. Even more so than Rick at the time of his, his time on the show. I just could really relate to the character, with the whole love triangle of him and Laurie and Rick and things like that. And you see that, he's just a dick who slept with his friend's wife. But he thought Rick was dead, and that happened a little while later. Him and Laurie had seen Atlanta being, bombed, basically. And they kind of needed someone in the process. Shane had, developed feelings for Laurie, which may or may not have been there a little bit beforehand. But, I honestly believe Shane that when he said, and brother, if I could take it all back, I would. And I sort of believe it. I don't think he can, remove the feelings he has for Laurie from himself, but I think if he like could literally choose to take him away and, you know, sort of like go back to the way things were, he would do it. But you can't just do that, you know. And, you know, something great about Shane was that he was very much like a realist in the show, you know, with how to survive. It was very cold, and a lot of people were put off by that, you know, as far as the other characters go in the show. But it's a very ironic parallel that Rick has sort of adapted like Shane's way of survival. Shane was sort of like ahead of his time, and now Rick is sort of like acting like Shane as far as what to do to keep everyone alive goes. And so that's very ironic, and tragically ironic too, because Shane's dead now, so he would fit in well enough with the characters now. But Shane is also a bit of a hothead, but nonetheless he could sort of like understand him. I could understand him anyway. And, you know, of course, loved all his shotgun skills and things like that. And just quite a bit of depth to Shane's character as well. And, you know, just what they did with him in season 2 is very much like a Shane concentrated season. And let's see, there's just a lot I could talk. There's just too much to talk about with these characters. I swear it's getting kind of overwhelming, to be honest. But let's see. Yeah, something else great about Shane though was, you know, that when he actually died in, you know, the episode before the finale, Better Angels in season 2. You know, when he takes out Rick and he doesn't take out Rick, but when he takes Rick out to the field after he, you know, made that whole setup of killing Randall, you know, and saying Randall was still like running around in the woods somewhere, you know, it was all set up to kill Rick. But I sort of like to go with the theory that Shane actually maybe sort of like wanted to die at this point, because he's sort of like seeing that things weren't going to go back to the way they were, and they weren't going to go to where he wants them to go. And so maybe he figured that if Rick was able to actually kill his best friend, maybe Rick would actually be more able to, you know, keep Laurie and Carl and the rest of the group alive, be more fit for this world. And I think it's to this point Shane maybe wanted to die, and it's even John Bernthal points out that he had this like sort of like alternate ending for him. The same thing would have happened, except when Rick looked in Shane's gun after he had killed him, you know, he would have seen that the ammo clip was empty. But of course in the official version of the episode it wasn't. And yeah, you could still see Shane's hesitation, and you could just see like the way Shane was like egging Rick on, you know, I'm a better father than you, I'm better for Laurie than you, man. That's because I'm a better man than you, Rick, because I can be here and I'll fight for her. But you just come back here and you just destroy everything. Even right here, right now, you ain't gonna fight for her? You know, and things like that. But, so I feel like Shane was like sort of egging Rick on, so maybe he was trying to push Rick to kill him, which is what happened. And just the complete devastation of Rick actually having to do that himself was very painful for the character. And Ender Lincoln played that part so well as well. And yeah, Shane has an everlasting impact on Rick to this day, because he's still very much a part of Rick's psyche. You know, we've seen him hallucinate Shane in season 3, and you know he was mentioned in season 4 as well. You know, when when he's tying the door, Carl mentions that Shane showed him how to do that, and you know Rick admits that he actually still thinks about Shane every day, because he killed his best friend for those people, and you know that's gonna be a permanent scar on Rick's character for the rest of the series. And so yeah, my throat's getting very dry right now, but I still have 2 more characters to talk about. So yeah, my number 3 favorite character of all time on the show, The Walking Dead, dead or alive, would have to be Shane Walsh, John Bernthal. And yeah, I had a very difficult time whether to put Shane at number 2 or number 3. But because Shane has been gone for so long now, Daryl has sort of taken his place as my number 2. But if Shane was still around at this point, he would probably still be my favorite character, at least right up there with Rick. But because he's been gone for so long, Rick and Daryl have had so much more time to develop as characters. But still one of my favorites nonetheless, and a character I'll never forget during the show. And still he was involved with like one of my favorite points of the series, is the whole story that he went through season 1 to the end of season 2. It's still very much a more personal story than we've seen in a long time. So yeah, played brilliantly by John Bernthal as well. A great actor on the show, one of the best actors they've had on the series in my opinion. But yeah, number 3, favorite character of all time on The Walking Dead, John Bernthal, Shane. Anyway, my number 2 favorite character of all time on the series would have to be Norman Reedus' Daryl Dixon. Very much our crossbow wielding muscle on the show. But just the way the character's developed since season 1 and season 2, with his search for Sophia, and sort of like, he's still sort of this like lone wolf type of character, but he's actually become one of the, if not the most trustworthy member of the group, with his unshakable loyalty to Rick, and they've kind of formed like a bit of a brother relationship too, like Rick says at the end of season 4, "You're my brother." And just the way Daryl's changed, since all that damage he's been through with the abuse from his father, and his struggles with Merle and things like that, to of course seeing Merle die and stuff like that, which is very devastating for the character. But all this damage that he endured, only to actually be able to connect with people again, and actually care about people, and keep the group safe and be one of the key, very much key members to the group. It's just an amazing development for any character. And because of all that development throughout the seasons for the character, I couldn't put Daryl any lower than a 2 or 3. And I put Daryl over Shane at this point because Daryl's been around for so much longer. He's developed so much more past the point of where Shane died. So I had to put Daryl at number 2. And just, he's so well developed, and Norman Reedus plays him very well, as I think. People give him some crap for it, but I think he still plays a great role. And of course, I love seeing all the crossbow kills. And I hope we see some sort of a relationship with him eventually. With him and another character. A lot of people want to see him and Carol, which I think would make sense. But now with Carol's twisted psyche nowadays, I'm not sure, even though it's realistic. But I'd like to see Daryl have like a romantic interest at some point. Even him and Michonne, I don't know. But Daryl, nonetheless, a great character, very well developed. And also, he was one of the more funny characters early on as well, but now he's become a little bit more serious and closed off again because of what happened to Beth and things like that. Which is very sad for him to lose her as well. And if he ever loses Carol, that's just going to completely tear him apart. And some people sort of expect the whole Lucille thing to happen to Daryl, which I think would make sense. Since Negan, it'd make more sense for Negan to pick out the toughest looking member of the group to make an example out of. But I'd rather that not happen to Daryl, just because I like the character a lot, even though it would probably make sense from Negan's perspective. But I definitely think Daryl's gonna be a character that's around for a very long time, if not surviving the whole thing, maybe. But I don't expect Daryl to be killed off for a very long time. And just a very essential character on the show right now. And he has been for a long time. Just a lot I could go on about him, but number 2 favorite character of all time on The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. So played by Norman Reedus, a great job he's done, and I love Norman Reedus' interaction with the fans as well. He's very considerate and very much into what he does, sort of like Michael Rooker. I just heard about Norman Reedus actually pulling a fan aside that looked like Beth, and sending a picture of her to Emily Kinney or whatever her name was, and giving the girl his bracelet and things like that. He just really cares about the fans, and the way he interacts with them really shows. But number 2 favorite character of all time would be Daryl. Great character. I could not put him any lower than 2 or 3, and right now he's at number 2. Just such a great character, and he wasn't even in the comic books. They found this way of creating character that completely organically for the show and completely original to the show. And I don't think they expect him to get this much popularity, with all the fangirls and stuff like that either. But like I said, for the billionth time, my number 2 favorite, Daryl Dixon. And finally, the last one, my favorite character on the show of all time, dead or alive, would have to be Rick Grimes, Andrew Lincoln. And you guys had to expect this. He was my number 1 on my favorite character, still alive as well. And Rick is just very much the heart of the show. He's very much our anchor and things like that. And even when there was a time in the show during season 4 where I wasn't as into it, as sort of questioning how much I really liked it, Rick was the reason why I kept on going with the show, why I'm still very much invested in the show. He's very much the main thing I'm invested in with the show. And just the journey we've been on with his character. through finding his family in season 1, through his trials, with, unfortunately, what happened with his best friend Shane. And, of course, losing Laurie is it was very sad to see. But the journey that took that character on was incredible. And, how he developed by the end of season 3 of saving people again. And, to become sort of adapting more of Shane's idea of survival in the world. It's very much a parallel to where they were at in season 2 with each other. And now Rick just has this brilliant yet paranoid mind of how to survive in the world they're in now. But he is very much right, even with that speech he made to Deanna and the rest of the Alexandria community. He's very much right about everything he says. And, he's a very strong survivor, very capable in fight. And, so there's just a lot I could say about Rick in general. But he's definitely my favorite character, and the character I care about most on the show by far. And, when Rick dies, I think the original series of the show should end. The show should begin and end with Rick, in my opinion. But, of course, I love his relationship with Carl. And then also I hope him and Michonne happen, but we'll see about that later. But, Rick, played by Andrew Lincoln. Andrew Lincoln does a brilliant job as well. Showing the emotion and like I said, the North way to describe it, the journey this character has been on. Andrew Lincoln's done such a great job portraying it, and I can't wait to see where the character goes long term, even further on in the show. And his relationship with Jesse, we'll see what happens with that. But my number 1 favorite character on The Walking Dead of all time, dead or alive, would have to be Andrew Lincoln's Rick Grimes. Definitely my main interest in the show is him, and just a fantastic character played by a very, very incredible actor. I could go on about him for a long time, but we're already over 50 minutes here. So we'll run through the list again really quick. My 10th favorite character of all time would be Glenn. My number 9 favorite would be Andrea. Number 8 would be Hershel. Number 7 would be Michonne. Number 6 would be Merle Dixon. Number 5 would be the Governor. Number 4 would be Morgan. Number 3 would be Shane. Number 2 would be Daryl. And number 1, of course, Rick Grimes. Officer Friendly himself. So hope you guys enjoyed this very, very long video. I know most of you guys probably didn't watch this whole thing, so just look at the list below in the description. And I still have 2 more Walking Dead video ideas coming for the rest of our wait. I still plan on doing a video talking about my top 5 favorite episodes of the show of all time to this point. And I also plan on doing another video talking about my favorite season of the show so far. So look forward to those at some point down the road here. And I'll catch you guys next time for whatever video I make. And peace. Voice crack. Great way to close it off, buddy. But peace.